Champion! Like one of those few that is already out. I have a friend who hates it when people say that. I have a friend who likes to say, I'm from Joburg, people say, don't think I'm from Joburg. And she's like, what's wrong with you people?
And in most cases they're like, no.
Yeah, where you live. Especially if you're black, you know, some homeland.
But everybody's an immigrant
It's come from some homeland. Eastern Cape, KZN, Togo.
Most people in Joburg are what's
Yeah.
Joburg people are really
She wants to go.
Is this my water here?
Just me.
started quarter to 5. I think so, quarter 2, I think. You're still at the right where you left.
Wait, safety does.
A whole bunch of things all at the same time, right?
I'm still doing a whole bunch of things all at the same time. A lot of my work, a lot of my I'm so busy.
You left a lot?
So 18 months. Maybe it's great.
Self-unemployment is great.
No, it's great. I mean, you know what? The thing is, if you plan, if you didn't plan it, I'll just wake up. So I had enough in that to help the unemployment.
The risk aversion is coming out right there, right?
It's
Enough in there.
not
I wish I knew that when I was
it's not risk aversion, it's risk
That's all. I had to get So what's the message?
I freelance today.
So you're on holiday.
So that's why I left you. I earn a living rate from since I interrupted you starting working. My main thing was the practice. It's good. Sometimes those days the same.
It's only retail as well.
That's why I like to I actually discovered that I love storytelling. in front of the camera. Because as you just said, I'm still enjoying like still communicating when I'm producing.
When you do something like bigger scale to production, that's different. You be involved.
Both of us.
How about you?
Yeah. So what I do
Would you do? Yeah, would you do?
get bigger contracts,
Would you buy?
which one?
Doesn't matter. I'm asking conceptually.
It all
Come on, you've been someone in my
No, but it all
know this
depends.
conversation.
No, it depends though, because the market, the TV market, depends which market.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I was going to
The
say
TV market is like
well, also,
seriously.
What's this all like?
Okay. Oh, wait, three? I think you
let go with that. Yeah, she recommended you, but I was confused.
I'm Babusha. My full name is Babusha.
I wish.
Oh, Lady Shadi. That's my Twitter handle, Lady Shadi. Oh my goodness. Anyway, that's why I just said coffee shiny because they always
Oh, is it?
always
Is it?
this stuff.
Some guy WhatsApp late.
Oh, Open Media. I know of this.
Brand is a piece of private
I would want to see what. Yeah, I would really
want to do something. Or you can say extend it.
probably not because we're building our own right now. You know?
Sometimes you want these acquisitions. Oh, you tell us just now. Well, that's all you do.
We might just end up competing with these guys.
I don't have to compete in your life.
Affording. Okay, so that hey,
So this person is.
Andy, just show me something and
Is
then.
this person
No, he runs a private equity company. He is his own private equity.
So, good morning to everyone. And my name is Nirupa. I'm the head of the School of Accountancy at Wits University. And my role this morning is just to do a short welcome. And then I'm going to hand over to Mr. Tim Modise, who will then introduce our keynote speaker. And then we'll introduce our panelists, our esteemed panelists. And then there'll be debate, discussion. So I'm going to leave all that detail to Mr. Tim Modise. But what I would like to obviously say is welcome. This is the first time from the school that we've decided to, in inverted commas, try something like this. So we really, really chuffed and excited to see the response that we have received for this event. We did a lot of networking this morning, and it was so much of a warm feeling for me to meet people that studied at Wits in my time, for me to meet people that I taught for the 18 years that I've been at Wits, ex-ATs, and of course the staff and students from my school as well. So I'm hoping that this would be a really enjoyable morning, and I know that all of us sitting here have very busy schedules. So for you to make this time, I really appreciate that, because I know when I get invited, it's like, it's always like, how am I going to get there? Is other things that are going to get left. So I really appreciate you making the time. And what we're really hoping to do is to have this as the first event to lead to a series of similar events. And already we've been discussing things like, if today the theme is on CAs and entrepreneurship. And we all know, we have a reputation that accountants are the grey suit, boring, risk averse, etc. And I think that's definitely not the case. But I don't want to go into the theme or the topic. I really want to leave that for the rest of the morning. But suffice to say that one of the things we're trying to find is what it exactly, and I don't want to use the word personality, but the characteristics that makes a good accountant and a good entrepreneur. And I want to share something personal. I actually do yoga, meditation, de-stress, breathing techniques, and that which I'm an instructor of. And last week, Wits was doing a theme on wellness. So on Saturday morning, we had a yoga session for 1.5 hours, and we had between 300 and 400 people, and I led the yoga. So the uniqueness was about being a de-stress teacher and being an accountant and a head of school at Wits. So it's not your traditional combination. And then another interesting thing that happened is the organization through which I teach all of this is obviously a non-profit organization, so I do it as a volunteer because I'm passionate. And I met with a group randomly that approached me, and just listen to this idea now, that they're thinking there's so many NPOs in our country, and actually the NPOs are almost doing the work of government because the government's not doing what it needs to do. But how do we know that we're donating to the right NPO, that it's going to where we need it to go? That's the challenge, right? So we were coming up with some ideas of how we could use accounting students to do almost a verification exercise, bring some king type of principles, so that we can almost, in inverted commas, certify NPOs to say if we think they're doing what they need to do, you can be a bit more confident and comfortable to put your money there. And that way it's community service for accounting students. We've been trying so hard to think, how do we get students to learn to give back from a young age? So I'm sharing very different things in my welcome and introduction, purely because I don't want to interfere with the theme of the morning. So on that note, as you can hear, I'm also not your traditional CA, certainly not. And with all the different things that we do, we all have very unique skills and combinations. And if we do this where it doesn't just end as a debate and a discussion and a morning where you go away and say, it was lovely, I met people, and then it's over. It's more about how we can grow and united make a difference to our country, because that's what our country needs. So on that note, I'm going to call on Mr. Tim Modise to take over from me and then continue with the morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thanks to everybody who's attending here this morning, and the panelists. I'll tell you about them in a moment. They are the risk takers. Andile would know about this because he probably wrote the payoff line or that promo for Power FM that talks about the chance takers, the risk takers, they do this, that, and he'll tell us more about it later on when we start the panel discussion. But of course, the focus, the theme is whether accountants, CAs, can become entrepreneurial, and if they can, how do they go about it? And basically, it's to unpack entrepreneurship from the perspective of the chartered accountants. And of course, we're here to share ideas with one another. But before we have the panel discussion, we have amongst us the founder of the Bidvest Group Limited and Bidcorp, Brian Joffe, who has 50 years commercial experience both locally and internationally. So he's going to sort of set the scene for us from a practical point of view on what his experience is in doing business in South Africa and the world, and what does he see in the accounting profession that might hinder or empower business people as they move forward. And amongst his achievements, Brian has been recognized by Sunday Times as South Africa's Businessman of the Year. He's won the South African chapter of the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur Award and represented South Africa at the World Entrepreneur Awards. He's profiled as one of South Africa's greatest entrepreneurs by MME Media in association with the Gordon Institute of Business Science. And Brian has been named by Wits Business School Journal as one of South Africa's top 25 business leaders with significant impact on business. And he is the recipient of an honorary doctorate in commerce from the University of South Africa, and an honorary doctorate in commerce from the University of Witwatersrand, and awarded the Sunday Times Lifetime Achiever Award. He has been included in the Forbes list of the 20 most influential people in Africa. Well, that's a heavy responsibility to carry, as you can imagine. 20 most influential people in Africa. I mean, you can blame him for everything that you find on the continent. And he was awarded the CNBC All Africa Lifetime Achievers Award. And Brian currently serves as CEO of Long for Life Limited, a company he founded and listed on the JSE in 2017, and serves as a non-executive director of Bidcorp. So he is our guest speaker this morning. He's going to share with us his thoughts, his views, and with time allowing, we'll take a few questions from the floor. So I'm not sure if it's an organic intellectual or academic intellectual or whatever intellectuals, because Wits produces all kinds of people, as we've seen on television. You see, so I was about to tell people myself that I met Wits this morning, but that does not make me a lecturer at Wits University. All right, let's get that 1 point clear. And Brian Joffe, please. Welcome, sir.
Let anybody in. Good morning, everybody. Quite intimidating to be back at Wits. I left here in 1971, so it just shows you how old I am. I started accounting in 1965, 66, and the rules of accounting have changed quite a lot since then. And might I add, the accounting of 1966 is a lot better than the accounting of 2000. And I'm going to try and explain to you why. I hope, because I'm not a lecturer either. We had very great lecturers, Professor Wimble, I don't know if you still use his books. You do? And Professor Cairns. They were great lecturers, and they were the people who taught me what I know. But before I kick off with a few concepts, can I just get an idea of what the profile of the people is? How many of you are students? And how many of you are lecturers? So more lecturers than students. More students than lecturers. And how many of you are nothing? You the entrepreneurs. So let me start off by saying there have been some great entrepreneurs in South Africa that have been CAs. Tony Gordon was one, Saul Kersner, to name a few. But that doesn't mean anything, to be honest with you. I don't think a CA is an entrepreneur, and I don't think an engineer is an entrepreneur. You're either an entrepreneur or you're not. And an entrepreneur is somebody who has a will to have limited or balanced risk-taking ability. And that's something that you're born with, or you can develop to some degree. But the degree of accounting in its current form is, in my opinion, not necessarily a good thing. So if I go back to 1967, it's so long ago that I can't even remember the date. 1967, accounting was a very simple process. Well, let me first start off by asking you a question. What do you think accounting actually is? What do you think accountants actually are? You're basically historians. You record history. In its current form, if you think about what we do as accountants, we record the documents and the history of something that's happened. And we have methodologies to record them. And so, I don't think that necessarily history or historians equip you to actually worry or to be able to contemplate what happens in the future, unless you believe things just happen again and again and again. And I don't believe that the world in which we live in today is anything like the world in which we lived in then, and I don't believe that the world of tomorrow is going to be the same as the world in which we live today. The rate of change is unbelievable. From the time I walked in here to the time that I started to talk, things have already changed. So, the mindset of the entrepreneur, and where most entrepreneurs go wrong, and where most accountants go wrong, is they examine the history. History is not really irrelevant in relation to what the future is going to hold. So if we go back to 1967, can we just have a board here which says 1967? And we deal with what accounting dealt with then. Accounting was a very simple concept. It was a concept of debit and credit. It was a concept of expense and assets. And it was designed with the concepts in your mind of how you live your life. I don't know anybody here who lives their life under IFRS 16. Does anybody know what IFRS 16 is? Do they? Well, if you do, you're better than the people who wrote it, because they don't know what they wrote. So when you deal with the concepts of what happened in 1967, what you used to do, you used to record exactly what really happened. I'm talking about honest people. I'm not talking about people who were dishonest. And so there was dishonesty in 1967, and there's greater dishonesty in 2019, as you all know. And the complexity that us accountants, and I don't want to blame anybody else other than ourselves, have introduced to the world, we made it easier to cheat. So we can hide now in a myriad of places, whereas before we couldn't really hide. So whilst accountants think they've done a great job, in my opinion, we've done a very poor job. So if you come down, and also, the accounting accounts that we prepare, I have only of you analysts, not one analyst. There isn't an analyst that I know of that takes the accounts that we prepare and takes those things and does statistics. They make adjustments. Why do they make adjustments? Because what we've written is junk. And so they rejig these accounts, and we have things called normalized, we have HEPs, we have all sorts of things which mean nothing. They mean that we're manipulating the numbers ourselves and cheating the actual result when we talk to people about how well or how badly we've actually done. So in 1967, what did we do? We just took the actual events and we recorded them for what they were. If you had a lease, you recorded the lease payment and that was it. It was as very simple as that. If you had an obligation, if it was a real obligation, you recorded it as an obligation. If it was one that was a contingent thing, you had a note to the accounts which said contingent liabilities were X, Y, or Z, and and you looked at these accounts. They took up 3 or 4 or 5 pages, not books. And you looked at these things and you could make some sense out of it. You knew where salaries and wages were, you knew where rent was, you knew what all this kind of stuff was, you knew what depreciation was. And I remember in my very first lecture when I did accounting, this question of what depreciation actually meant. Depreciation was actually a fund. And we even used to discuss, I remember my lecturer's name was Mr. Dickinson. I don't know where he is. Still around. Is he? He did a bloody good job. So he used to explain that depreciation, whether you kept it on balance sheet or whether you took the money and you put it into a sinking fund and you actually, that money was there for replacement of assets. Depreciation, is which we've got today, is not that. If IFRS 16 depreciation is some foreign concept to me, I don't understand it, and maybe you one day, you'll understand, somebody will explain it to me. But it was a very simple thing. So now let's fast forward now to 2019. You're now presented with a set of Bidvest accounts, and I'll just use them by name, it doesn't really matter, any one of them. And you're now going to make an acquisition. And you look at these accounts. And you have to now say, are these accounts available to me as an acquirer of a business to make some sense of them? And the answer to that is definitely no. because they don't tell you anything about the future, and they just complicated the past. So if you have a look at, for example, a very simple concept. What makes a good acquisition? Anybody know? Prospects. So the question is, how do you define what prospects actually are? Prospects are not the thing that the guy, the chief executive, writes in the newspaper when he says prospects the next year is going to be better than this year. Because I've never seen one guy who's going to tell you the truth. Every guy tells you a non-truth when he comes to talk about prospects. And I say that tongue in cheek because just now somebody's going to shout at me. Most people are honest, and most people give a balanced view. But what makes a good acquisition, and what makes you a good entrepreneur, and what makes you a great accountant, is if you can see in those accounts the future of what you can do with what's there, rather than what the guy did with the assets that were there. Because that's the difference between an entrepreneur and an accountant. An accountant can record and evaluate all the stuff of the past. Every one of you guys, even if you didn't do accounting, I don't think that there's one person in this room, or very few people in the land in which we live, who doesn't know the difference between good and bad financial management. And people don't believe me, but that's true. If you go to your household, it doesn't matter who you are, you know how much you've got money to spend, and you know how to spend it, and you know where to invest it, you know how to do good things about it. You don't destroy your assets, you look after your assets, you know what interest rates are. If I went around the room, some of you will tell me what's good investment. Some will say property, some will say unit trust, some will say shares, some will say X, Y, and Z. And all of you will know what you should or shouldn't be getting out of it. Is that correct? So the difference, and the most important thing, if you want to decide whether an accountant is a good or bad entrepreneur, it's purely dependent on whether you can see in the numbers what the guy who's been doing in the past hasn't seen. If you buy a business because it's a great business, boy oh boy, are you going to lose your money. Because if he's done a great job and he's got a prime business and you buy it, you're not going to do better than him, you're going to do worse than him. And that's a certainty. And what makes people do great deals are not buying great companies. If you want to buy a great company, go to the stock exchange, buy 5 shares in the company and let the guy who's running it run it. If you want to go and buy a company that's a great company and you want to run it, boy oh boy, don't come to me. Don't use my phone number. Use somebody else's. So then we come to this question about how do you decide whether a company is good or bad, and whether there is any merit in taking a thing forward. What do you think is the most? Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think profit, the word profit, is an important term in business management? Anybody think it is? Yes. It's not. Profit is just an accounting term that was developed by you people sitting around the room and some of me who said we were there in 1967. Profit is just the difference between revenue and expenses. It turns out to be profit. Do you know of any companies that have gone bankrupt making a profit? Give me one. One very big one. In your day. Maybe not in your day. You were still youngsters. Premier Milling. W&A. All of these companies were great companies. They also had great profits. So let me ask you another question. When you get to one of these companies that has lots of subsidiary companies. So now let's just take company, let's take W&A. It doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. Is that right? Doesn't. Doesn't exist. W&A. W&A had a pyramid holding company, something like Pickwick or whatever, Pick and Pay, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Had a pyramid holding company, and then it had W&A, and then it had a thing called National Bolt, it had General Tyre, and E.W. Terry, and these things were cascaded down. So they don't all wholly owned by the top company, or partly owned by the top company, they were owned all the way down. So if you owned a company, let's just take an example and see if we get the arithmetic right mentally. Say you buy this company and it's called, I don't know, Brian Joffe. and it's got a subsidiary called Lee Joffe, of which it owns 60%. And that company then owns another company called Jason Joffe, which has got 50% of. And then it's got another company which owns below that. It owns 40% of. And you add up all of these things, and what you do in accounting, you add up all the profits, and you see how much the minority piece is, and you say, this thing made a profit of X, and you've got a minority share of profit. Is that correct? More or less. Listen, if I fail, it doesn't really matter. I got my CA already. And I've got a doctorate, so I know what I'm talking about. So you've got that structure. How much do you own of the bottom company? I don't know. I forgot what the arithmetic is. But let's call it 15%. And you're doing all the work you're doing 100% of the work for 15% of the profit. How much of the cash flow have you got? Nothing. How much of the cash flow have you got of a company where you own 51%? None. How much have you got of the cash flow of a company you own 99% of? Zero. So the only time that you really have got access to 100% of the company that you own is when you own 100% of it. Because otherwise you're totally reliant on the dividend flow. Because if you've got a company that owns 99%, the only cash that you've got of the company that's underlying is the dividend that it declares to you. And if it declares 50% of its profit, you don't get 100%, you get 99% of 50%, and that's all that you got. And it's very difficult in the world in which we live to be able to operate businesses without money. I know that there are some that do a very good job. I think it's called Eskim, I think is one. And I think there's some others called SAA and Transnet and a few others that we can name. But you cannot run a business without money. And therefore, when I come back to the question of profit is not money. Profit is a calculation, an arithmetical calculation, that it's an accounting term. I know people don't agree with me, but it's rubbish. And I have never, in any of my business career, incentivized anybody in any one of our groups based on profit. Because profit anybody can make. So if you make a profit of $1 billion, and you've got assets employed, does everybody know what assets employed is in a business? Do I need to explain what that is? You all happy? You sure? Otherwise, lecturers would better go back to school. If you make a profit of $1 billion and you've got assets employed of 100 billion, have you done well? You made R1 billion profit. You've done lousy. You made 1%. How much should we make? Anybody got any idea what you would think would be a reasonable return in South Africa for a trading business? Reasonable return. 10 to 15. Anybody got any other idea? 20. Anybody got any other idea? Well, let me just ask 10. Do you think 10 is a good return? How much is the cost of capital? Cost of capital in South Africa is more than 10%. So if you're making 10%, you may be thinking you're doing well, you may take your wife, you're buying aeroplanes and whatever it is, until one day you borrow money. Now I want to raise one thing for accountants. This calculation that we do of return on capital, does anybody think it's a good statistic? I'm the only one who doesn't think so, by the way, but you guys may think it is. Do we evaluate in our performance criteria when we do this stuff, what is the return on the borrowed money in the company? And so, one of the things, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too technical. If I am and you're not enjoying it, you just, the doors are there, you just stand up. You find out one at a time. It's like going to church, you're unhappy with the sermon, you just sort of like turn around and sort of walk out. The point I'm trying to get to, I guess, at the end of the day, the only time any entrepreneur will venture any money, if you're an entrepreneur and you venture money based on a balanced view of life, is if you can make a better return than you can make something else. It's a relative thing. If you want to go and make money, and you're happy to make 10%, why in the world would you go into business? You can go to Standard Bank. Who's somebody here from investing? Used to be. Yeah, you know. So I would go to Investec, and maybe I wouldn't get, in today's world, maybe I wouldn't get 10, but I certainly would get 7.5 or 8. And I don't need to go into business. And I don't have to face anybody's problems. I don't have to have any employees. I don't have to go and have an audit done by Ernst & Young. Are they here? Or Price Waterhouse, or any one of those. I believe one of the panelists is from Deloitte. You don't need to do any of that stuff. That's not what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is making more and beating the odds. I'm not talking about hit and miss. I'm not talking about scoring home runs with one hit. To me, that's gambling. That's not how people make money. You will have one guy who gets it right, he wins the lotto, does this, that. Maybe there's one guy in the world who's done that. But that's not how people make money. People make money one step at a time, relative to what you could do alternatively all the time. So if your benchmark is that you're happy to make 10%, you're not an entrepreneur. You're just an accountant. Bad luck. Or good luck. Because the one thing about being an accountant or being any professional is when you go home at night, you don't have any worries. You go home and it's a lifestyle that you like to enjoy. You take your kids in the morning, you take them to school, and you do X, Y, and Z. That's one lifestyle, and it's not bad. One is not better than the other. And I don't think that being rich or being an entrepreneur makes you anything special. It just makes you do what you want to do. Some people are good at riding, cycling. Some people are very good at rugby. You can see how good I was. That wasn't too bad. And others have got different desires. One is, of course, is to make money. And if you want to make money, then you have to decide what is the risk profile that you want to adopt in order to make money. And you have to know what this actually means in real life. Right? So you have to decide how much return do I want to make and how much effort do I want to put in and how much return will I get on the effort that I put in. And that's the accountant's job. That's the entrepreneur accounting. And that's what you get in this particular course, which nobody else gets. You don't get that in engineering, and you don't get that in the arts, and you don't get that in medicine. You get lots of other things, but you don't get the ability to be able to measure return in accounting terms. And that's why we've got in today's accounting and balance sheets mislead us totally as to what the real world is all about. So the first thing that we've got to establish when we do these accounts that we are going to use for entrepreneurship accounts, listen, I have a different version. I've got businessman's accounts. And I believe that, and I'm going to do it, I think probably in this particular set of our results, publish businessman's accounts together with the IFRS accounts, because they are not the same. Businessman accounts show you what the real position really is. You take the shares in issue, you gross them up. We know how many shares are in issue, not those that are subject to option, this and that, and whatever. You can't grow this and you have all of the stuff hidden. It's all of it hidden, and you don't really know. So you've got shares in issue which don't equate to the legal statutory number of shares in issue, which to me, I don't understand why you would do that, but you do that. Okay, anyway, I don't want to criticize the accountants too much because I know that I'll get into trouble with it. So the first thing to do is we need to be able to say what are the assets employed and how much is the return on the assets employed. If you can do that, you're well on your way to becoming an entrepreneur. And as long as you know what you want to be able to achieve and whether you can forward look at these accounts. So you can take a set of accounts of a bad business and you can say this business is only making a 5% return on the funds employed. Now I talk funds employed, I'm talking about gross assets less non-interest bearing liabilities. I'm not talking about interest bearing debt because I said in the beginning one of the things that we don't do is we don't calculate the return that we make on the interest bearing debt. So many people have put a lot of capital in the business and they don't know that they're losing money on the interest-bearing debt. So you're borrowing money at 10%, you're only making 9%, you're losing 1% on the interest-bearing debt, and that's not a very clever thing, because over time, you whittle away at the capital, and eventually, boom, bang, boom, and your name is X, Y, or Z. Marcus. So, I don't know, I mean, one day, maybe I'll get invited by you guys to do a workshop. And the workshop that I normally do, and one of the things that I always did at Best, which was to start off with this very simple concept. Aunt Jemima dies, and Aunt Jemima leaves you 10 million rand. What will you do with it? And then you will find out who the entrepreneurs are and who the entrepreneurs aren't. And so when we come to this question, coming back to our thing, we've now found this business that we're wanting to buy. It makes a 9% return on funds employed. How do we get to make 35%? 20% is not good enough. For the effort, you want to do it? I don't. And there are ways to get a business which is, because a lot of businesses have got lots of assets employed in the business they don't even need. For example, it's got, how much return do you get on a building? 10%? Maybe. Some you get a little bit more. If you hold it for a long time, maybe a little more. 10%. So you want to be a building owner? Whatever. You want to be an entrepreneur? If I can make 35%, why do I want to have a building that I've got 10%? Sell the building, take the money, and invest it at 35%. I'm not saying that's a good idea, by the way. Don't go and sell all your properties tomorrow. Unless you call me up and give them to me first. So the point I'm trying to make is that you've got to take what you see, simply put, assets, stock, debtors, creditors. I mean, that's probably fixed property, fixed assets, fixed. Those are the four categories that really count. The rest don't count for anything. Why are creditors such a good thing to evaluate? Because it doesn't cost you anything. It's the cheapest money you can get. It's the only time a guy gives you money for free.
Yeah.
So we take fixed assets, what I call funds employed, or fixed assets or gross assets. Fixed assets, stock, debtors, stock, debtors minus creditors, not cash. Because we're working at returns and it's not based on cash. So no bank interest-bearing debt, no cash balances. And you work out what your profit is as a percentage of that is your return. That return, in my opinion, in South Africa for an average business should be about 35%. Towards pre-tax. So, yeah. Now, one day if I get invited, I'll show you how to take a business that makes 9%, only theoretically, of course. So how you could take that same business and make 30%. And it's very simple, I'm sure that you can do that. But if you can do that and you can actually de facto see how to do that in real life where the guy who's selling you the business hasn't done it, boy oh boy, you're away to the bank. You're an entrepreneur. I don't know how much time we spent, but if I don't know, maybe it's long enough already, I don't know. But maybe I can do some questions and maybe you can get it. But all I can say to you is accounting is a very, very good profession. It gives you a very big start on those people who don't understand what the meaning of assets are and how to determine and how to read what these assets actually are. Please don't take audited financial statements, read them and think that you know what's going on, because you don't. And if you believe that those financial statements that are given to you under IFRS give you a true reflection of what the business is and whether you can buy the business under IFRS accounting, you can't. Straight line leases don't exist. I've never entered into a straight line lease with a landlord. The landlord says to you, I want to get 100 rand, escalating in 8%, and I record in my accounts that I'm paying something different. So they don't really mean it. They're there. They give an understanding of what the potential business looks like as a going concern, but they don't give you the information necessary for you to decide whether the business is good or bad, and whether you yourself can manage that business and get a better return than the guy who's currently managing. You have to deconstruct the IFRS component pieces. Go back to 1967 accounts, or what I call business accounts, which records the real facts of what it is. Share-based payments. Bullshit. I say that because Warren Buffett decided, he was the guy that said one day, there is a charge for giving staff shares. Well, there is. It's called shares, extra shares in issue. You don't have to go and calculate a double price or whatever. And under that particular thing, if they, now I'm going to tell you, where is my man from? He's not here, my accounting man from Wits. If they market-related share-based payments, you can't reverse them, even if they don't vest. Does that make sense to anybody? Didn't make sense to him, but he's clever. I'm talking about Warren, yeah. Anybody know Warren? Hello, Warren. Very clever man. Very clever indeed. Anyway, we're learning with him together. So, as I said, I'm happy to do a workshop one day, a very simplistic thing. It's not a complicated thing. I don't do complex stuff. If a transaction that you're going to do in your world of entrepreneurship is complicated, don't do it. Only do transactions that are simple. Only do transactions that are commercially based. And only do transactions where you can be a value-added component piece to the business. If you do a transaction where you're just buying somebody else's knowledge or wherewithal, history, you'll lose your money. So buy bad businesses, don't buy good ones. So if you want to, we can do a few questions. I don't know if that's enough time. Yeah.
In terms of current business structures, etc., there are a lot of businesses that don't or are heavy asset based might have a brand or goodwill or intangible asset coming through on the balance sheet, which, as you rightly say, might just be someone's concoction of what that intangible is worth. How does one address that in terms of the due diligence?
Well, look, there are two component pieces to returns. One is the return of the shareholder, and the other is the return of the management. And they're not necessarily the same. Because if you make an acquisition, you could create goodwill or intangibles or whatever on acquisition. And those, when you come to evaluate it as the shareholder, doesn't necessarily mean that you've paid the right price. So, for example, if you buy a business and the assets and you overpay for it and you create this intangible, which is uncommercial, if you could do that under IFRS, but let's say you can. That doesn't mean that the management can make a return on what you've paid. So the management is running a business. If you just take a simple thing, let's just take a trading business that's got stock debtors and whatever, and you go and you buy, and the business is bought by some other guy and he pays goodwill. The return that the operator is making on the stock debtors and creditors is not the same as the return of the shareholder. And we've got to be careful that where we fit into the equation. You can't say to the employee, listen, yeah, I've done a bad deal, you need to make 35% return. You just can't do that because that's just not commercially possible. And you have to then decide, I've overpaid for the business, write down the assets to what's commercially based. I think the question here is, the assets are worth what the assets are worth. It doesn't really matter whether it's a building or whether it's a trademark. They are the same in a way. If you buy a trademark that you can't make a return on, well, that's a problem. The money's gone out of the door. You've paid the man, you've given it to him, whatever. He's gone away with your $1 million worth of intangible asset. It doesn't really matter. You have to make a return on the million, whatever that is. So what I do find interesting about some of these questions is the depreciation of trademarks and some of these things which I don't really understand. One day I'll come to you for a lesson. I don't understand how an asset is worth less the day after you bought it than the day you buy it. Anyway.
Can I ask what you believe is the difference between a good leader, a good entrepreneur, and a good accountant?
How much would you pay for the lecture? A good accountant is a historian. You'll have to remind me what the three things are because I've got. So the accountant is an historian. A good accountant, if you really want to do, is a man who comes along, records accurately all the documentation, and reports to an entrepreneur or a boss or whatever it is, what the facets are that are important in the accounts. You overspent on salaries and wages this week. You have a budget, and you have variances, and you have all that other kind of stuff. That's an accountant. That's a guy who does that. that kind of stuff, that makes a good accountant. Somebody who's reliable, gives you the information that you need in order to make a decision. Second one was a leader.
And the difference between a good leader and a good entrepreneur?
I don't think they're the same. I think, just coming back, the entrepreneur is a person who has the judgment in order to make a balanced call on future potential. And I'm not sure, and it was one of the things that somebody else asked me once upon a time. I'm not sure that entrepreneurs only exist in the business sense. I think entrepreneurs also exist in the engineering sense. In space, where there's judgments to be made in relation to the future and where there are balances that have to be weighed up. I think that's what an entrepreneur actually is, and I don't think it necessarily only revolves around money. But seeing that we're talking about business entrepreneurs, I presume that's what it means. Leaders, I think, are people who can develop a following of others to believe what they believe. In other words, take momentum forward of what a leader thinks is right or wrong. Leaders aren't always right. So, I mean, we always talk about good leaders in the case where the decisions of the leaders are good. But you can have good leaders also where decisions are bad. Because I don't think that in life everything is cut good or bad. And I think if you take business and entrepreneurism, or life generally, life's made up of different, and entrepreneurialism is made up of different blocks. So you have good blocks and you have bad blocks. I don't think that you have only good things in businesses. But every business, if you only got very good things in businesses, means there's no growth. There's nothing to fix, and it's very boring, and there's nothing to build on. And I think in case of leadership, I think you have to be able to convince people who are with you that this is the way forward, follow me, believe me, trust me, and have the gravitas in order to pull them along in order to make a team. Because I don't think anything works one singly. Everything's interrelated with others. And I think a good leader is somebody who has the trust of others to believe that the way forward is that he's suggesting is the right way forward. And sometimes that is a tough space. And I think being the chief executive of a business, especially a big one, is a very lonely space. Because in the case of business, we employed 140,000 people, and it was 140,000 people who thought they knew what they were talking about. Most of them didn't really understand anything. But the issue at the end of the day is that they believe in me, and would they follow me if I said X, Y, or Z? In most cases, the answer is yes.
Mr. Joffre, I just want to, because I'm thinking when entrepreneurs desire to operate their businesses in an economy that's functional, that everyone has disposable income, they can support their business, etc.
Why?
Because I'm guessing most of them are in the business of making money. So
But why? That's the wrong way around.
the
The best opportunity is when everybody else is not worrying about the business. When everybody's in disarray and concerned about what's going to happen tomorrow, and I come back to what I said at the beginning. Can you see tomorrow? Is tomorrow positive? Now is your time. If you don't think tomorrow is positive, now is not your time.
Which gets to my question, because a lot of businesses, when they don't see tomorrow as a positive, they tend to fall. But I'm guessing good entrepreneurs, the ability to see value in what people don't see value. So then, in tough economic conditions, how do you advise an entrepreneur to still stay afloat and create revenue and value for their businesses when all around it's all black and white?
Because you see tomorrow and they don't see tomorrow. The same thing, if you go to buy a business, the guy's going out of business. He's very sad, in the microeconomy that you're talking about, two people, a buyer and a seller. The seller's down and out, doesn't know what to do with the business, has made some fundamental mistakes. You come along and say, that mistake that he made over there, it was a mistake, but it's only a one-time mistake. If I don't repeat that mistake, the business will look X, Y, or Z. You write it back, you adjust the assets, I sell some assets, instead of having $1 billion of assets, I'll only need 700, I'll generate 250 million, 250 cash, and so forth. Doesn't really matter what happened. You're into a new world. You're seeing the sunny side of the world, not the dark side of the world. And that's the difference between an entrepreneur. If you see an entrepreneur that says to you, Oi, things are bad. Sell his shares. Oi, things are bad.
Or buy his business.
Successful entrepreneur. But you indicated that to manage a business, one should own 100% of that business, especially from a cash perspective. Why then did you list long for life?
Okay, so what I said was that the holding company needs to own 100% of its subsidiaries. In the case of Long for Life, that's true. So it may well be that you don't own 100% of the top company, which of course is ideal. But the problem in the world in which we live, you want to build scalable businesses. The capital that's available to an individual is very limited. So if you take, for example, Long for Life, whatever, Long for Life started with 4 billion rands worth of cash. I didn't want to put 4 billion rands worth of cash. And in any case, I'm happy to share. But Long for Life's cash flow is generated by 100% owned subsidiary companies. In the case of Bidvest, 99% of the businesses are 100% owned. And in the case of Bidcorp, 99% of the businesses. It doesn't mean that you can't, there are obviously exceptions to the rules. Sometimes you can't get it. For example, if you're investing in China, you may not want to own 100% of the business in China because maybe it's not such a good idea. Because maybe, or Russia. Just to give you a little funny story. We were looking to buy a business in Russia once. And I walked into the offices, and on the wall, when you buy businesses, one of the important things to know is compliance, which is a very important thing, and I don't want to belittle compliance, whatever. But in any case, this business had on the wall a certificate from the Revenue Department of Russia, giving these guys a gold star, and I think they used the word gold star for compliance and tax, whatever. We started to do due diligence. They were totally non-compliant. There was nothing compliant about what they did. The only thing they were good at was cheating. Wow. So, yeah. And compliance, which is a really important part of I think, of accounting as well, is that compliance really, to a large degree, is not a set of rules. It's a culture of an organization. So it's really important, and I say that in relation to South Africa as a country as well. It's really important that the culture of the country has a sense of compliance. Compliance will then manifest itself in the whole country or in the whole business. But where you have this issue about non-compliance at the top, you can be 100% sure that you can have non-compliance at the bottom. And it's no good blaming the guys at the bottom. The guys who are responsible are the guys at the top, in business and or wherever. This time is when you must stop, right?
Hi, so I'm from the tech space. So
which one? The revenue department?
Where we usually suck valuations. What I wanted to know is, what do you usually look at? When is it a bad idea to buy a bad company, and when is it a good idea to buy a bad company outside of cash flow? Because we usually
the only time it's good to buy a bad company is when you can do better with the company than the guy who's selling it to you.
And what do you usually look for?
Sorry?
What do you usually look for?
Well, there could be many opportunities. It could be, for example, the assets employed are too high, the expense base is too high, his location of his factory is in the wrong geography, he doesn't need to produce, he can outsource. I mean, there are many different facets of that thing. But you have to have the vision to see, when I'm in this business, I'm not going to do what he did. I'm going to do X, Y, or Z different. And that could be anything. I don't know what the circumstances are that you're talking about. It could be anything.
So the reality is that a lot of us are accountants, and you mentioned about how there's certain characteristics that we should leave out as accountants. But I want to ask, given the fact that we're accountants, what traits should we focus on, and which ones should we?
I think that I should set the paper, one question in the paper for the board exam. You still do board exams? Yeah. I should do the board exam question. And the one question I would give you in the board exam question is how to fix this company. And how to make this company better. Because to me, that's really important. It's not a record of what you do. What's really important is how can you advise yourself as an entrepreneur, your boss who's the entrepreneur, the world in which you live, how to make something better. And how do you take what you've got and make it into something better? And that's what you're learning. You're learning the recordal. The only thing that you need to do is you have to be able to make the judgment. The decision-making process that went into the recordal of the transaction that you're putting down, was that good or bad? I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have done it another way. If I had done it the other way, the transaction would have been recorded in the books in a different manner. It would have resulted in more cash in the bank, which is important to remember, and then you would have had the outcome that you want. It's really important. I don't want to emphasize it over much. If you want to be an historian and just record the facts, that's okay. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to understand what was done and how you can do it better. You read one.
Do you think now is like one of the best times to invest in South Africa?
Let me ask you a question. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say yes or no, because you'll come back to me and tell me, listen, I made so much money. And if you do that, you won't give me any check. If you lose your money, you'll come and tell me you told me so. Let's take Greece. Remember, Greece was in crisis.
Yeah.
Do you think it was a good or bad time to invest in Greece?
Good time.
Good time. So, please ask.
Well, thank you very much, bro.
Thank you very much, Brian Joffrey, for sharing with us your experience, observations, and of course, historians can make money, can they? From what you told us. So, you know, when I went to school, I never thought historians actually focused on how much money a company could make. But now, one key lesson that I took away from you.
Historian and write a book, maybe you could become
But much appreciated, and thanks again for sharing with us your insights based on your first-hand experience in the business world. Now, we have 3 panelists who I'm going to invite to come and sit with us here. Brian, you can take a chair here or over there, it's up to you.
Up to you. Listen, I'm you the leader.
And then, if I can convince this group to follow me, yes, I'll be the leader, but so far I don't seem to. And the 3 panelists have got diverse range of life experiences, as much as they share one thing in common, and that is being trained as chartered accountants. And then, from then on, they became historians of a different kind, if one may call them that. Shadi Chauke is a performing artist, executive producer, and professional non-executive director. And she studied her commerce degree here at Wits University, and whilst working as a qualified chartered accountant in corporate and as audit partner and Deloitte, Shadi participated in the dramatic arts, attending drama lessons part-time, and after 13 years in the corporate world, Shadi decided to pursue her acting career full-time. In 2015, she was accepted into a 6-month acting program with Indigo View Advanced Actors Academy. And from then on, you know, the world of acting became her world. And since commencing her professional career as an actress, her experience includes her first international credit as narrator in the award-winning documentary film Have You Heard from Johannesburg? And she also performed as Lola in Netflix's first South African original action thriller series, Shadow, The Throne. She's been in Isidingo, Ring of Lies, etc., etc., etc. And she's appeared in commercials and other things. Shadi, okay, we can be here the whole day trying to tell your story, but there you are. Thank you very much. And of course, Andile Kumalo is a seasoned entrepreneur and chartered accountant, a former colleague of mine, and very passionate about entrepreneurship. He is founder, CEO of Kumalo Company, an investment firm with interests in technology, media, telecommunications, financial services, and venture capital. He also was at Deloitte, and in 2002 joined Investec as an investment banker, and he was with MSG Africa from 2007, where he exited the business in May 2018. He has served in various non-executive roles over the years, including as member of the Takeover Regulations Panel, member of the Directorate of Market Abuse, and Brian, you'll find this interesting, was a director at SEA, President of Abasa, please come forward. He's the founder of I'm an Entrepreneur, a national program that helps entrepreneurs grow their businesses, and has served as fellow of the Center for African Management and Markets at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, and he regularly writes for the Business Times. The overall winner of Top 35 Under 35 CAs in 2018, the co-founder, director of the Malanda Group of companies. The Malanda Group provides professional advisory and resource solutions to various large and listed entities. And the advisory business provides managed chartered accountant and finance resource solutions to an array of clients in various sectors and industries. And Lyle has created employment opportunities for over 70 chartered accountants and finance professionals. Lyle, please join us. Well, I think rather than ask the question the way we framed it, let me ask you just 2 minutes, each of you, to respond to Brian's take of what he thinks an entrepreneur is, speaking from your own experiences. And let's start with you, Lyle.
Okay, I mean, I think sitting here, it's probably hard to go against what Mr. Joffe said, right? I mean, he's probably sort of the leaders in the space. But I think for me, I agree with those sentiments. I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, it is, it's firstly, I want to say it's a lifestyle rather than it is maybe a career or a job or anything along those lines. For me, it's something that you live every day, because you don't go home at 5 o'clock and it shuts off. It's always something that plays in the back of your mind. It's something that you're always looking at those opportunities and those strategies and seeing that value where there isn't value. And I think I 100% agree with that sentiment. I think it's important as an entrepreneur that you can look at something and see the positivity in it. I think it takes a, I'd like to say, a very positive person to be an entrepreneur. And I think that's sort of a very important quality in my books at least.
Thank you very much, Alain. And Andile, you've been going around the country. You know, I want you to tell us about your own take as well as what you find South Africa thinks an entrepreneur is.
I must agree with the two gents who've spoken already. I think that entrepreneurship is a lot about risk. It's a lot about wanting more than the average return. I totally agree that if you want a fair return, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. It's much harder. And I think it's also a mindset. It's somebody that wants something different. I totally agree that I don't think entrepreneurs are only in business. I think there are many other parts. I think Nelson Mandela was an entrepreneur as far as I'm concerned. Where I'm seeing in the country, I think there's a lot of confusion between small businesses and entrepreneurs, or small business people and entrepreneurs. I could have been a plumber. I think it's a very honorable profession. But I wouldn't call somebody who does that necessarily an entrepreneur. I think that is somebody who's self-employed, earns a good living, and has chosen the lifestyle that they live. I wouldn't put that in the context of being an entrepreneur, because again, from a risk and more than the average return perspective, it's probably not the lifestyle you're talking about. And I think when government goes on and kind of talks about SME development, it's probably the right term, right? Small, medium enterprise development. You're developing small, medium enterprises, which is quite different to me than developing entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs may start out as SMEs, but they're certainly not set out or planning to remain SMEs. Whereas maybe the electrician guy and the plumber guy is quite happy running his business out of his Nissan 1400. Do they make those still? I don't know. But you know what I mean? So I do think that there's perhaps a mismatch in terms of like how we all experience it. But largely, for me, ever since I was a young boy, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. That's all I've ever wanted to be. In fact, there's a funny story even with Brian Joffe. So I worked for Investec when I qualified at Deloitte. My first job was in Investec. And during my articles, I audited McCarthy, come from Durban. So I was the in-charge accountant of the audit of McCarthy. I was the historian of McCarthy. And back then in corporate finance, the bosses would have a meeting on Friday mornings. And Eldad Friedman was one of my bosses, because I was new. I knew nothing about corporate finance. And Eldad said, look, Bidvest is considering an acquisition of McCarthy. And I stuck my hand up and I said, I know everything about McCarthy, which I did because all you do is live on McCarthy. When you have one of those big audits, all you do is live on that audit. Like, so that's all I really knew from my articles. So by luck, I got to meet Brian and work with him on that particular transaction, and it was complex. But I got to see, what was behind building Bidvest. So I do think there's a very big difference between a small business person and an entrepreneur.
Thank you. Shadi?
I do agree with all the gentlemen who have spoken about what entrepreneurship is, but really what I want to say is an entrepreneur is someone who solves problems. You need to identify solutions or opportunities for solving problems, and you need to identify a market that's ready to basically buy that solution. So that's what I see an entrepreneur is.
And whilst you're still on the floor, Shadi, let me stay with you for a while, because it's not a walk in the park to be an entrepreneur. It sounds sexy, and people talk about it all the time. And with all the high unemployment rates in South Africa, people go out and say, "You've got to be an entrepreneur. You've got to be an entrepreneur." But it's not as easy as all that. What are the three most important factors that you think contributed to your success or continue to support you, as well as the obstacles that you overcame or continue to deal with as a challenge?
So, as an entrepreneur right now, I run a TV production business. I'm with my brother, and because acting doesn't pay, by the way, in case any of you are wondering, acting does not pay. So, as a CA, thankfully I've got that background. I partnered up with my brother, who is the filmmaker. He is the creative. I'm the accountant. I'm the risk manager. I'm the person who understands capital raising and all of that. So, one of the critical success factors right now is, especially in the TV business, you all have seen what's happening with the SABC, and the market in TV right now has always been, your biggest customer was your SABC or Mnet, but now at least there's the advent of video on demand. All the video on demand platforms are coming in, your Netflixes, Showmaxes, HBO. So what's wonderful is that at least now, finally, the market is opening up. But, it's very difficult to actually eventually get a commissioning contract from any of those VOD platforms. So what we did is we've diversified our customer base now to corporates. And we do corporate videos or educational videos for corporates. And one of the success factors, as you go into any enterprise really, when you're starting out, the key thing is making sure that you deliver, So deliver on what you've promised that you would deliver. And the other success factor that I can say we've managed with this one corporate client that we have is, doing customer satisfaction surveys or getting your feedback from your customer just to make sure that, are you on the right track? Are you delivering on what you've promised? And then exceeding your client's expectations. So we've done pretty well, especially in the corporate sector. We're trying to make a name for ourselves as a video production company among corporates, and not just TV producers for TV platforms, because the market there, that is a very long-term play. You have to literally be not earning an income for quite a long time before you can finally manage to land that contract. So, one of the challenges that we've suffered as a result of branching into something new, like going into getting a corporate client, is generally corporate clients don't have an understanding about how much it actually costs to produce a video. So you will have somebody saying that they've employed a script writer to write a script, and here it is, and we have already quoted a certain amount of money in terms of how much it's going to cost them to make this particular video. And by the time you get the script, you find out that the client is expecting you to employ hundreds of extras so that you can film a scene like this. All of you guys are attending a session, and let's say it's written into the script, and now we have to go and source 100 extras that come at, even though it's a small amount of money, but in totality, it's a lot of money. So some of the obstacles that we've come across, diversifying into getting corporate clients is, getting the price right, really. And I think that's I suppose, a challenge that any entrepreneur sometimes may face is, you know, getting that price right at the outset and not coming back to your client and then saying, actually, I did underprice, and please, can you give me more, you know, give me more fees.
And I can imagine the response typically would be, but I know somebody who can do it for $50.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, the obstacles are great, and those who work in the media space would appreciate. But there you are, you're still hanging in there. And Andile, from your point of view, what do you think are the important factors that contribute to the success, yours, and even of entrepreneurs that you know, and the obstacles that they've got to negotiate?
Right. So for me, I would say probably the single biggest contributor in my journey. I pretty much spent my 20s being trained, my 30s actually operating a business, where every day I open the door, I've got staff, I've got customers who don't pay, I've got creditors hounding me to pay, I've got SARS. I didn't have the certificate of the war, definitely. I was in breach many a time. And now I'm 41, I'm starting a new journey of being an investor in businesses. I'm new at it, so I'm going to attend Brian's workshop that he's going to run about 35% return on capital employed, buying bad businesses, so funds employed, I'm sorry, yes. So that's kind of my journey now. But when I look back, Pratim, over the, call it 20 years of kind of working life, I would say the single biggest contributor has probably been social capital, if that makes any sense. Like the amount of people that I've been fortunate enough to support me at every point. Because there's always somebody who's done something before, or who knows more than you on a particular thing. When I think back all the way from getting a bursary from Deloitte, to getting on the right jobs, shooting articles, to getting the job at Investec, to starting my first business, to winning the radio licenses, to launching something new in a place where there was nothing similar to it before, having legends like you work with me every day. I wake up, I hang out with people like Tim Modise. I mean, that's amazing. I'll just look back and I'm able to pick up the individuals that I encountered who helped me. And that's why I try and make time to help others where I can. Obstacles, it's the other capital, which is the financial capital. Entrepreneurship by its nature needs to be spawned by risk capital. Somebody with capital must be willing to take some risk that this idea is a good one. And if your business is not you buying a business, which, you know, Brian, I guess, referenced a lot because I guess a big part of his life was indeed investing in businesses. If your idea is starting a business, like, you know, what Lal has done here, what Shadi and her brother have done, that capital is not in big buckets around our country, unfortunately. We're seeing a lot of that, I guess, globally, with the advent of technology. I heard there's a tech entrepreneur here. So there's pockets of the West, in the US and in Europe, where indeed, if you've got really good technology and people can see you being able to scale, even if you're making losses, you're probably going to raise money, right? In our environment here, I guess a lot of our businesses are different to that, very industrial type businesses, very kind of retail businesses. Yes, there's some technology, but even in the technology space, there isn't a lot of risk capital. So I've found that to be a real challenge where you think you're onto something, where it's a business you've started, or maybe you're buying a really bad business and people are like, you know what, it's a lot easier to buy something I can go and read the history books on for the past 10 years. So that's been difficult.
Sure. And Lion?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, adding on to what everybody's just said, I think sort of so our business essentially is involved in a lot of human capital type resources, and for me, it might sound funny, but a big challenge for us is people, and people in the sense, not in the sense that you don't want people in business and tech's a good thing. People in the sense that that you need to create a following of whatever it is that you're doing, and as a leader. Brian, and the question alluded to it earlier, is that you need to create a following of people that buys into your vision and buys into your dream, essentially. And that's not an easy thing to do. I think it's something that you might believe sort of that every step of the way of what you're doing is the right thing, but there are always going to be people that don't buy into that vision, and it's about almost showing that sort of a part of that journey is to show that vision in a different way to different people so that they understand where you're heading to, I guess. And I think that for me was one of the biggest wake-up calls, is that you head off in this direction, you make a decision, but if you don't have the buy-in of your team, it's very difficult to achieve that goal, or achieve what you set out to achieve. And I think that was one of the ruder awakenings that I've found, is that it's important to have the backing of your team and the backing of the support structures that you have around you when you do make a decision within business as a should.
Thanks very much, Lion. Well, another question I want to ask you as panelists is that, qualified chartered accountants, the impression that some of us, men and women in the street, the grassroots, we think you've got license to earn as much money as you like. So it suggests that you must have lost your mind a little bit, and maybe Shadi, let me be provocative with you first here, to decide to go into the dramatic arts and carve a niche for yourself there as an entrepreneur, when you could have said the so-called something to fall back on, right, that you have as a chartered accountant. So what is it that inspired you to become an entrepreneur and to stay on the journey?
So I think what's important is just understanding what your purpose is, right? So for me, I've always known that my purpose is to inspire. My purpose is to tell stories, or to inspire through telling stories. I've always, when I grew up, I thought I was going to be an actress. And now I've actually taken the leap, so to speak, to explore a career in acting, and I found out that it does not financially sustain you. But ultimately, I'm still living my purpose in the sense that I'm producing stories now, and I'm doing that for a living, and I'm earning money from doing that. So I did not just wake up and decide to leave Deloitte and a fancy job and decide to go into this. It does take a lot of planning. You do need to make sure that if you are going to go and be an entrepreneur, you're going to need capital. You're going to need to financially sustain yourself. So have that plan, have that financial plan in place. So I had a financial plan. I made sure that I had literally, partners do earn a lot of money. And I saved, basically. I saved a huge kitty for myself. And well, it was huge in the sense that I can afford right now. It's like, as I left Deloitte in February last year, and I haven't drawn a salary. But at the same time, I have been earning a living, as a director as well. So what is nice is that, as a chartered accountant, I'm able to also earn a living and serve on company boards and earn director fees. I'm able to basically play basically a portfolio of careers in order to earn an income, while I am building, an enterprise. So ultimately, for my brother and I, we want to build a highly successful TV and film production business that tells impactful stories. And we want to employ people who are in the creative sector for us, that's what gives us life, is to be able to provide employment in the creative sector. So as long as we are able to do that, that's our purpose fulfilled.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Andile, I suppose in your case, you sort of referred to it, that you always knew that this was the path to go. But at what point did you decide that, let me transition now and just be a full-on entrepreneur?
I became a CA because I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So it is weird, because I was young, right? I didn't know all the stuff that I now know. So in high school, I remember this day very clearly, we used to get old newspapers. So we would get the business report. I remember, so we was in Durban. So the Natal Mercury had the business report as the insert for business. And that's what I would read during guidance class. We had a lady who would come on Wednesdays only, once a week, was our guidance instructor. We had guidance class once a week. And I told her I want to be an entrepreneur, so I would page through the stuff. And they'd also give us old annual reports. Anglo, Val, all those companies that don't exist anymore. And I read that most CEOs of listed companies who built those companies, not just serving as the CEOs, were either engineers or chartered accountants. And I liked English and I liked maths. So I found out that to register for a BCom degree, you needed, the minimum I think was English and maths, not even accounting. English and maths. So I figured, I don't like bridges and stuff, which is what I thought engineers do. And I want to be in business, and it seems like a lot of them are chartered accountants, and just BCom sounds like a commerce degree. That's what I'm going to do. So I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't really like, I mean, I could do it, but it wasn't like the thing. So I became a CA because I wanted to be a chartered accountant. And when I look back at that journey, I cannot think of a better journey. Because today, when I walk in a business discussion, it could be one of our investee companies, I'm trying to help them win a client, like I'm going to be doing this afternoon, we're going to pitch to a client. People always do a double take when they find out that I'm a chartered accountant. They just do. It's a thing, it's an IP you carry wherever you go.
Yeah.
Especially when you're not in the kind of work they expect accountants to be in. So it's worked for me.
Thanks very much. Now, Lyle, I'd like you to comment along similar lines, but being in the more human capital space, as you said, how you are responding as a company and what your take is of the increased digitization of the economy, because some of chartered accountants and people in professions such as yours are very concerned that we're moving in that direction and maybe human capital is not going to play such a key role.
But for me, I think digitization isn't something new. It's something that's always been, coming along for a long time since the invention of computers. And I think it's something where we need to be adaptable within that space. There's always going to be a need for emotion. There's always going to be a need for certain levels of intellectual capabilities that might not be reached through an algorithm at this point in time. But obviously there is a risk. There is a risk that there's certain things that are going to become automated. There's certain roles, there's certain jobs and functions that are not going to become automated. And simply put, from a business aspect, it makes sense to cut costs within those areas. But I think for our responsibility as an employee, or our responsibility within that space, is to move our mindset with the times. How do we be able to, or how do we adapt ourselves to be able to work around those sort of the looming fourth industrial revolution, if you want to call it that? And how do we adapt our skill sets to be able to embrace the technology to be able to move our careers forward? I think that's the challenge that we face, and I think we don't know what those technologies are. We can see a lot of those things coming through, but I mean, I don't know about sort of all of you in the room, but I'm still confused about what blockchain is, right? And all these different technologies that are coming through. But I think it's also our responsibility to be able to upskill ourselves and be able to reinvent ourselves in a space of where there is change, because change is coming. It's, there's no way of getting away from that. And I think it's, as I said, it's our responsibility as individuals to be able to move our careers forward and work alongside technology rather than to try and fight it or work against it.
Okay, I want to open this discussion to the floor so we can take a couple of questions. But maybe before we do that, let me ask you to comment, Shadi, first. What advice would you give the chartered accountant students who want to be entrepreneurs? I mean,
don't do it.
And by the way, I saw a report in one of the Sunday newspapers, I think, which said that it's more people with legal training from especially this institution who seem to have made more money than people from other professions. Yeah, well, I mean, chartered accountants are up there with the engineers, but they discovered that it's actually people who studied law, who maybe by virtue of being deal makers or that sort of thing, I'm not sure. But anyway, what advice would you give the chartered accountants who want to be entrepreneurs?
Sure. I mean, Andile spoke about capital, right? So it's a very scarce thing, and what I would advise any student right now is just understand that cash is always king. So how do you get cash? How do you also build credit worthiness while you're still a student, even when you start working? I mean, I have a sister of mine who was so averse to debt. And there is such a thing as good debt as well. But she was so averse to debt, always made sure that she bought everything cash. But by the time that she started working and she needed to get a car, there's like no credit history. Like, you know, financiers it's so funny that financiers want to see that you actually have existing debt. Nobody wants to try you out for the first time and lend money to you. So I'm still saying this with caution. Do have good debt, you know. Build yourself a good credit record so that when you then need to start borrowing money, people have a good credit, you know, you will have built a good credit record for yourself, and then at least people can see that this is somebody that I can trust and I can advance money to. And what else do I want to say? I think you can also make sure that, you know, the world of work is changing now. A lot of companies are embracing that people can actually do multiple work. So do start, you don't have to wait until you even finish your articles to start a business. So find a way to start your business while you're still working, because that way you're going to be building that, you're going to be building your business, and by the time you take that, what you call proverbial leap, you will have already created a brand for yourself. You will have already built your company. So do that. Make sure that you build yourself a kitty, so that, you know, when you do leave that comfortable job and you're no longer drawing a monthly salary, you've got, you know, finances that are going to help you to live, essentially. That's what I did. I made sure that I was able to still draw a salary and still, you know, fulfill my financial obligations.
Well, there's a big difference, I suppose, between wanting to do something and being able to do that thing, right? You may be trained as a chartered accountant, but you may not have the, let's call them personality traits, character traits that will help you to be an entrepreneur, particularly given that the accounting training itself may contribute to the risk aversion, for instance, because you'll have seen a lot of companies fail, and therefore you're not sure whether you should go or not go. Given the type of training that accountants receive and the character traits that you need to develop, the muscle that you need to develop to become an entrepreneur, can you share with us thoughts on that?
So Pratim, for me it's relatively simple. You're gonna first qualify, okay? Before we all get like ahead of ourselves, especially to the students. Can we just finish here at Wits? Can we pass?
Yes.
Can we write the board? Can we get good, decent training during articles? And can we qualify as chartered accountants of South Africa? Full stop. Once you've got that, then the truth is, there's probably not a lot of things you will do wrong in your life or make a mistake that will make you starve, unless you are untrustworthy, unless you're a thief, okay? Because then your reputation is screwed, and then of course no one's ever going to touch you with anything, right? So once you're qualified as a CA, I don't know, man, I just don't see you starving. You're going to be okay. Like, you've got a professional qualification that can pretty much help you find something somewhere. No one's going to die. We're sharp. You've done enough. Secondly, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, after you've qualified, my tip to you is work for a company or work in an environment that helps you get a broad understanding on how business works, how businesses create value, right? As opposed to being in an environment where you're not exposed to really how business works. How do people grow companies, buy other companies, launch new products, hire best people, incentivize people, lead people like Lal was talking about. Try to be in a space that gives you a broad exposure to how business works and what makes businesses tick, how people create value, how people save businesses that are doing badly, all those kind of things. Try to be in that kind of environment. And for me, to some extent, being in corporate finance helped me at least be close to the people who are running the businesses, because oftentimes, me and my bosses thought we were smart, but the real smart people were actually our clients, because they have to build those businesses. Maybe I could have been in a business, right? I could have worked in a real operation. So I would say, don't underestimate the time you'll spend in a company. Very often, the new entrepreneur, he's the guy who's actually a dropout of school, so he doesn't even finish the qualification, and then he becomes a billionaire. Comrades, there's a reason why there's only a few of those people in the world. There's a reason why. There's a reason that you and I can probably count them in one hand, if we're lucky, maybe both. The rest of us actually have to work to earn a living. So I would say, absolutely qualify. First, spend some time in an environment where you can learn as much as possible. Don't underestimate that. When I look back at my life, I wish I had spent more time in Investec. I wish the bug in me to be an entrepreneur could have been a bit more patient, because I can't imagine how much more I would have learned. But then again, you know, hindsight is 20/20 vision. Maybe I wouldn't have learned the lessons I learned as an entrepreneur, having left Investec at the time I left. So no one really knows. So in summary, that'll be it for me. Qualify, get enough kind of well-rounded business experience, then calm down. Don't stress. Don't be overly anxious. If you've got the qualification and some work experience, unless you're a thief, you're going to be fine.
Thanks, Andy Line. Are there any particular attributes that you, and we'll come to your Brown in a moment. I've got a question for you, by the way, that's coming out of this conversation, this discussion. Go for it.
Just to add to that, I think maybe for me it was something about finding your passion and finding what it is that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. For me, I don't feel like I have a job or that I work because I truly enjoy what I do. And it doesn't, I mean, I enjoy business. I enjoy sort of looking at the strategic side of things, looking at where I can unlock value or where I can see potential or where we can grow things and how we can expand things. And that's what makes me tick and what makes me drive. And I think that's also an important component, is to say, what is it that actually makes you tick? What is it that you're passionate about? Because that is something that you're going to put your wholehearted effort into. I mean, sort of, I know of chartered accountants that have businesses that are nothing related to finance. And that's because they found what they are passionate about and made it work, because they understand what Andile was speaking about. They understand the business principles. They understand the core values of what a business should be and how to derive value out of those businesses. So I mean, I think all those steps are important getting to that point, and then it becomes a point of where you can actually do whatever it is that you want to do. And entrepreneurship necessarily isn't about building something in a conventional sense. It's about building something that is, you can look back on and say, this is something that I'm passionate about, this is something that I wanted to do for me, not for necessarily for anyone else. And I'm building this because I wanted to achieve something out of my career, out of my life, essentially. But also looking at it and saying, what is the impact it's going to have on others, and can you live with that impact, essentially?
Thanks very much. And let's get a comment from Brian. I've got one question with two elements to it after this.
Can I just say, not to disagree with you. For me, you need to start today, not when you're finished. You still do tats. So why don't you just, every time you get a tat, write a little business program on the tat. So when you do these tutorials and you have a look at them and you look at the companies and the examples they give you, spend half an hour with a mate. Find a friend, somebody who's interested in it, and evaluate the business proposition of the tat. And write down how you could see this business being changed into the future. And maybe as a suggestion to the university, just to add on to the tutorial piece, a one paragraph piece which basically says, write a business resume, proposition on the tat. Maybe very interesting to see. I've never done it before. I just thought about it now. But start right now and send me the royalties.
All right, Brian, whilst we still have you on the floor, I just want you to comment on 2 points that I think came out of what the panelists said earlier on. One was that of raising capital, or venture capital, that is scarce in South Africa for people who want to become entrepreneurs, and the role of luck in succeeding in business. Somebody once told me and said, you know, notwithstanding all the stories you hear about this, that, and the other, you also need luck, but I don't know where you find luck. But there you are.
So I'll start with the second part. There's no such thing as luck in business. You make your own luck. And everybody can see the same proposition, and I alluded to it earlier. If you don't see it, you've got no luck. If you see it, you've got luck. So it's a question of keeping your eyes open to the obvious. And sometimes most people don't see what the wood for the trees, and most people don't make their own luck. So when you see something that somebody else doesn't see, that's in my definition the business luck that you need to do. In relation to the capital raising, it's a very sad thing for South Africa we find ourselves in, and it's one of the remnants, whatever, of a project. Because capital raising is really given to people it's easier for people who have track records. And track records come from lots of different things. Families, family history, and a whole lot of that kind of stuff. And it's a very, very, very sad scenario. And, you know, the government started a program called the SMME Fund, of which I was one of the original starters. But to be honest with you, disappointingly, it also hasn't really been able to do what I think is needed to be done. I don't think that there's really, you know, generally speaking, I say to everybody, if you've got a good idea, money should never be a problem. And that is true for people who've got track records. If you've got a track record, money is never a problem. And the big problem and the big challenge for South Africa is how to build this history and this confidence in the new generation of people coming up. And our new entrepreneurial skill sets of emerging youth, you guys, is incredible. And I don't think you must underestimate the ability of the entrepreneurial spirit that resides within South Africa. We do lots of things. And, you know, when people say, oh, well, the unemployment rate is 30%, it may well be statistically 30%, but within that 30% unemployed is a huge amount of unconventional entrepreneurialism that exists. Otherwise, we would have riots here, and it doesn't really manifest itself that way. So I'm very disappointed for our country. I'm disappointed that we find ourselves in the situation that we do. But we have to work hard at finding a method to give credibility and opportunity in capital raising to emerging and up-and-coming students. But I start again, and I say, the world of entrepreneurism doesn't start on a particular day. It doesn't start when you decide it will start. It starts now, and it's either with you or it isn't. And if you want to make it part of your life, then make it part of your life. You don't need to choose what you want to buy. You need to be able to start to build a skill set. And I'm going to close with one little story. I was in the game park yesterday, and I saw a cheetah with 4 babies kill or try to kill a steenbok. So the mother half killed the steenbok, and then gave the steenbok, which was still alive, to the children to practice their skills at killing the steenbok. And if you want to be great entrepreneurs, you need to start to practice now the skill set that's going to be needed in whatever time frame you decide to use it. You need to make sure that you are skilled at the time you start. You can't learn on the job. Learning on the job is like a golfer who takes his driving range practice to the golf course, and that doesn't work. So try that, Dilly. Play golf. Can't practice on the golf course.
All right, thank you very much. There's a final comment that I'll ask from the panelists, but we would like to accommodate a couple of questions before we close. Okay? I'm skipping you deliberately, but I'm going to come to you as the third question. Of those who raised their hands, who did not ask the question the first time around? You did not. Let's start with you. I'm politicizing the whole thing, as you can see.
I hope I'm audible. Hi, my name is Khan. I'm an academic trainee at Wits. I'm also a small business owner. I'm also an entrepreneur, the budding entrepreneur. So this was helping. And I'm also actually doing a bit of research. I had a question to ask specifically because I've noticed most of our panelists are also I'm interested about the training program that everyone actually exited from. Would you say the training program in a way enhance your ability to become an entrepreneur or not? Or should we be looking at that? If someone perhaps wants to become an entrepreneur from a young age, or I just want to be sure.
So the question is, you know, the programs for chartered accountants, can they be improved so that whatever skill sets that you need to become a successful entrepreneur can be provided? Is that correct? Okay, got it.
And then just one more question.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, this is the last question. And then I think I did allude to the fact that a bit of it when you were younger, there was someone who wanted to become an entrepreneur because CEOs and people that started successful businesses ended up being chartered accountants. I just want to find out again from the panelists, would you say there were specific maybe role models that might have helped you to get where you are in terms of being an entrepreneur? Do you think it's important to have CAs like yourselves as role models in entrepreneurship and innovation?
Thank you. You want to go, or should I take all questions and then we respond? What do we do?
Maybe all questions, yeah.
Okay.
Because there's many of us we can speak.
All right.
Let's go to
So mine is, because a lot of the time that I find that people who studied or ended up becoming CAs end up going to business that's related to what you did, be it financial services, accounting, advisory, whatever. So my question is for those that want to start business outside of that realm. So for example, agriculture, property, whatever. Would you say that it's important for someone to go back and get re-educated in that particular industry they want to go into? Or is it something that you should just go into and learn the job?
Hi. So my question is, how much is enough capital to start a business? And for some reason, I agree with Brian said that you don't necessarily need to have a qualification to start a business or to be an entrepreneur, because I know of a lot of people who are not qualified, but they're in business and they're doing well. So I don't know, how much is enough capital to start a business? And when is it that point when you feel like, I want to take the risk? Where do you even start? At what point do you realize, yeah, that's my question.
My name is Charles Khan. I'm involved in mergers and acquisitions. I am a chartered accountant. And like Brian, I think I come from the school of thought of the 1967s, 1970s. But would like to convey the following to the young up-and-coming chartered accountants. I think the chartered accountant within the space of the SME family businesses becomes part of the family of that business. So I'm talking here more on the human element side, where you would be invited to all the family dues, etc., etc. So I think a young chartered accountant should also look at the side of humanity, being a responsible citizen, making sure that it becomes the confidant of that particular business. And that chartered accountant would form a part of ensuring that if a transaction, as Brian says, takes place, that confidant between the owner of the business, there would be that rapport, and that would create also opportunities where SME businesses currently do have a lot of capital tied up, especially at my age. You would find the older businesses becoming available, and a lot of the guys would not want to sell their businesses. They become very emotional, and I think the chartered accountant could perform a very good a service to encourage deals to be done and jobs to be created in South Africa.
Thank you. So we'll take a question from you, sir, and the gentleman here in front, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is I'm Moses from Ikuruleni. By virtue of age, I'm already a CA. Yeah, mine is just a comment, but just to say, we're working with cooperatives, we're working with SMEs, we're working with NGOs. So mine is just to say, how can the panelists assist us in just uplifting them, uplifting in one way or the other, just to add value to them, because now they are working very hard. They don't have those qualifications, but they need that bottom-up approach just to assist them.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Frank. I'm a CTA student at Wits University. Just have 3 questions. Quite quick. Firstly, to Mr. Joffe, I'm thinking from the time you started as an entrepreneur, the space of entrepreneurship has changed over time. How did you personally keep yourself afloat? Did you go to get extra courses, surround yourself with bigger business people, etc.? Secondly, to Shadi, with obviously technology going the direction that it's going, do you think storytelling would change in future? We'll be seeing Lola being played by a robot on TV for once. Lastly, to Lai, how long as an entrepreneur do you stuck up to making losses? All things being the same, passion versus money, which one do you feel is more important? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, if we can go for it, respond.
There was a question about, I'll get to that, there was a question about articles.
Yeah.
Just
Insufficient.
Yes. So what I want to say is I trained at Deloitte. It was what they call training inside of public practice, so I don't have an exposure to the guys that have gone to corporates to do their articles. But I definitely found a lot of value in being an auditor. I found a lot of value in the sense that the division that I was in, we audited companies across various sectors. So what's really great about being an auditor is it is the only profession, I believe, that a company is obliged to literally strip down naked for you. You know what I mean? And I don't think consultants can have that privilege, but as an auditor you can actually use that experience to learn from other business persons. You have the ability to do an entire walkthrough of their sales system, of their supply chain, understand what regulatory environment they're operating in. So I think there's a lot of value and experience that you get out of training as an auditor. It definitely does prepare you, and it does give you somewhat business skills, I suppose. But when it comes to being an entrepreneur, I mean, we've already said there's various obstacles that you need to know how to overcome. You also have to have a lot of tenacity. So there's things around your character that aren't taught, and you can only really dig deep and find them from within yourself. To be tenacious, to be resourceful, to really pursue and not give up, essentially. So that's what I want to say about articles. I think there's a lot of value. I think the only thing that I think as trainees you miss out on, a lot of people who end up leaving the profession as such, and no longer want to be in audit. It's all because they don't really get that tangible experience of perhaps from a business perspective. I think training can articles can change in the sense that trainees can be given exposure to business activities. For example, all audit firms have to pitch for business all the time. So if a trainee was given an opportunity to shadow in a proposal team and actually understand what it's like to research a particular target client and participate and go through the entire chain of events and shadowing to see how you actually win business, that is an incredible skill. And a lot of the times trainees aren't brought on board for activities like that. You also end up qualifying as a chartered accountant not knowing really what fee negotiation is. If we could actually get trainees exposure around things like that, around fee negotiation, around presentation skills. I mean, a lot of the times as an entrepreneur, you need to know how to be a good presenter. You need to sell yourself. You need to sell an idea and convince someone to buy it. So those are the kinds of skills that I think are missing as when you're a trainee.
All right, a quick response on the question of,
I don't think, I think
people.
ultimately human beings still need connection, and I don't think that that's the kind of thing that you can ever automate. That's what essentially drives people, that's what inspires people. So I don't see ever, if there's any technology, I suppose, or room for technology to make an impact, it's in how we consume content. So now at least we've got various platforms from which we can consume content, and no longer on just television. Now it can be done on demand. So I mean, the challenge that we have as a producer is making sure that you also are technologically advanced in the kind of equipment that you use so that it can be able to be broadcast across those various platforms.
Thank you very much. And well, Andile and Lyle, as you comment, please also comment on the question of the training programs if you think they need to be adjusted in any way or improved on.
I'm going to touch on one question first in terms of, I think it was a question around how much capital do you need to start a business. So, I mean, I guess there's a different answer for every single entrepreneur. It depends on what type of business you want to start. But I'll give you maybe a little bit of my story, and maybe this will help. So we started a business, obviously qualified as a chartered accountant, and we started a business with 2 people and a laptop. And essentially from that perspective, it's not necessarily, it depends on the idea and what you want to achieve. Obviously, if you have this big tech idea that needs lots of capital, obviously it will differ. But to be able to become an entrepreneur, if that's truly your passion and in your blood, my view is that you don't really need anything. There's value in the power of your network and the power of people that you know. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, you want to start a business and your end goal is maybe to build some sort of app, a fashion retail store. There's nothing wrong with selling bags that you don't have. So you know you can buy bags from someone else, sell it to your network and create profitability and generate revenues from that and build on that. So it's not necessarily a hindrance to say, oh, I'm going to stop because I don't have any capital. There is ways and possibilities of making things happen, in my view at least. Yeah.
Sorry, in terms of the training.
Perfect. And then in terms of the training programs, I started business almost straight out of articles. I spent about 2 years at Deloitte and then moved into the entrepreneurial space. So started a business at the age of about 28, if my maths is correct. And for me it was, so the training contract was a lot more, it was good things in learning about controls, learning about risk, but there's things between the lines that maybe you should take note of. And the things between the lines are things like, why is it important to have that control? I think it's easy to get through your training contract essentially and saying, okay, well, this requisition needs to be signed, but what is the reasoning behind that? Understanding those processes maybe is something that we as individuals need to take cognizant of. So I think the training contract as it stands is robust and there's a lot of thought processes that's gone into it. I think where in my personal opinion, I think someone asked the question a little bit earlier, is that there could be more around building personal relationships and networking in that space. I think within the training contract, we neglect the power of the people around us, and I think we also neglect our how well we understand things. We're surrounded by intellectuals all the time, especially within the space, and people that are in the accounting space essentially, but you do know a lot about business and harnessing the power of what you have actually learned and being taught in between the lines. You are taught it, but it's not necessarily the thing that sticks out to you. We become, I guess, to a certain extent, agreed. We become parrots, and auditing only made sense to me probably 2 years outside of articles. And I think it's those types of things essentially. Once you're in business, understanding the practicality behind that was very important for me. Then I think there's one more question around passion versus passion. Yeah.
Passion versus
for how long is an entrepreneur to stick up to making business?
Perfect. See, I told you I had a So in terms of, for me, I think any entrepreneur, you're getting into business to make money, right? It's obviously the end goal. And you want to be able to build a sustainable business, and without money, you can't drive that passion. So I guess how much cash do you have is probably the answer. But I think it's just realizing that with that passion that you have, if you just continue to make losses, are you doing the right thing? Are you seeing the value? Are you seeing the way to monetize that passion? And if you continue to make losses, maybe it's not just about making losses. Maybe the answer is either reevaluate what your business model is, or reevaluate whether you should be in that space at all.
The only addition I'd have, Brett, to what my colleagues have said is, so I told you that I became a chartered accountant because I want to be an entrepreneur. I can guarantee you that being an entrepreneur has got nothing to do with being a chartered accountant, because it just doesn't, okay? It really doesn't. Being an entrepreneur is being an entrepreneur. Being a CA is being a CA. Being an entrepreneur who's also a CA has its benefits, and those are the benefits I truly appreciate. So when you talk about training contract, it's not supposed to be training you to be an entrepreneur, okay? It's trying to train you to be a CA that may eventually become an entrepreneur. When you talk about, people who build businesses kind of in the profession, advisory businesses and risk management businesses or consulting firms or people that do it outside. It's the entrepreneurial drive. It's what you want to do. Where do you see the opportunity? Where do you think you can have the best impact? Where do you think you can put in the effort for the best return? It's got nothing to do really with being a chartered accountant. And maybe lastly, I'd say when I was particularly to the students, when I was in 4th year, and I knew that I was near the end of the dread of university, I thought my life is really about to begin. And the end of this horrible thing called university is coming. I can guarantee you, everyone that's here will look back at their lives and probably think their days at university were the best days of their lives. Okay? So before you get overly excited about getting out of here, enjoy it. It really is likely to be the best times of your life. It's likely for you to meet the best friends that you'll have forever. Most of my mates are people I went to university with. My wife I met at university. This is your life. Enjoy it. Don't be too eager to end up here. Enjoy that side, please do.
And of course, SARS pays particular attention to people who are here in front of you. They've got a lot of issues.
Brian, I'd like you to make the comments, and there was a request of sorts that what kind of assistance can be given. I'm not sure if it's up to the department to respond to Ekurhuleni or anyone wants to respond to that. You want to say something about it? Okay, all right.
So
right.
Can I just say, don't overthink the issue. You guys are thinking too much. There's too much planning going on, whatever. Let life take you where life takes you. When you go to a restaurant, ask the question, how much money is the restaurant making? Then you're an entrepreneur. Then ask the second question, say, how much did he invest? And then you're an entrepreneur. Then you see whether he's making a return or not, and see if you can come to the restaurant next week or not. Maybe you must. So all I can say to you is, listen, I think this is a great platform for you guys. Use it and think it. The theory is only there for the principle of thinking. It's got nothing to do with the reality. Doesn't really matter how many times you can write down a debit and a credit. It means nothing. Right? Because you're not going to do that at home. Yeah. So I wish you all well. And listen, we've got a great country. We're going through some tough times. Entrepreneurs will see where the opportunities are. As for the retail operator on the other side, who's my competitor, that I've just learned about, watch out. I'm closing you down.
Sorry, on the question of the Ekurhuleni, I just wanted to say that the one way I certainly can help is we run a program called I'm an Entrepreneur. What it is, in summary, it's a full-day summit where we upskill entrepreneurs. So I think we put way too much emphasis on qualifications, to be very honest with you. I think what technology is teaching us is that we should put more effort in skill. Do I have the ability to do something? As opposed to, do I have a certificate that shows the world that I'm supposed to have the ability to do something? So in our program, we upskill entrepreneurs for all sorts of business skills, because we recognize that not everybody may have had the ability to be skilled. So we run one per province for the year, so we've got 9 of them essentially. And what I can do is get your details, and maybe you can send some of your entrepreneurs to come and attend our Gauteng Summit. It's going to be in March in 2020, if that's okay with you. Thank you, sir.
And thank you very much to the panelists and our special guest here, Brian Joffrey. A round of applause would do the trick for them. Yes, sir.
My question wasn't answered.
What? Which one?
So my question was, so between learning on the job versus you actually upskilling yourself before you go inside the industry.
Well, I said earlier, you can't learn on the job. There was one question which came up over and over. It was the question about how much knowledge that you have to have as an entrepreneur about the activity of the business. The answer to that is very little. You need to understand the financial mechanics of what makes things good and bad. And I'm repeating myself. You need to be a returns-based thinker. And you can hire 65 doctors who can tell you how to do an operation. They don't know how to make any money. You need to know how to make the money. And by the way, on the artificial intelligence guy, make sure you find the right robot that you can partner with.
Prof, if you can please come forward. And once again, thanks to our guest here, we appreciate it. And thanks to you too. You invested the time, and I'm sure you already expect some returns on the time that you invested. So you are entrepreneurs in your own way. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I appreciate it. Prof, thank you.
So once again, I would like to obviously thank each and everyone to have made the time to come here. I know that you all are busy. Of course, a special thank you to Mr. Brian Joffe to do the keynote address, and to our esteemed panelists, and to Tim Modise to have facilitated this. So I want to also specially thank and mention two of my staff members who drove this whole thing, and it's Henriette here and Avani there. So the reason I'm making this special announcement is that they sort of two of my very stressed out staff who don't really like to be in the limelight for anything. So I said to them, so to be quite honest with the panelists, with Tim, and with all of you, I did it as, if I can use the word, experiment. And every time they came to me, I just threw things back at them. So talking about all the entrepreneur skills, I forced them to be resourceful. I gave them Tim's number. I could have made the call. I just gave them a hard time in a nice way. And this morning, I feel so proud standing here to see. So now we're going to make these regular events now that they've got the framework. Yeah, they've got it. So I'd really like for you to acknowledge them, actually. And then, of course, I also want to finally thank all the admin support around that. So this is being live streamed as we have this event. And there's all the admin guys, you saw them running around and getting things, and of course the staff from the school. So as always, it's really nice to be the head where you do the intro and you just be nice, you just talk, and actually everyone else does the work. So that's actually even better than being an entrepreneur, because I don't have the sleepless nights. Everyone else actually make this happen. And to end, a thought that I would like to leave all of you with. You see, whenever we talk about entrepreneurship, it's indirectly something that makes us think, how do we make more money? And as Brian said during the morning, you get different forms of entrepreneurs, but in this space, we're obviously talking about making more money. And for me, being extremely passionate on the opposite end. So quite frankly, with respect to all you entrepreneurs, I'm not one. I don't really care about money. And I think that's a completely different space where if you look at all my academics, it takes a special breed to be an academic, because university doesn't pay like acting doesn't pay. So the thought I would like to leave you with actually is how then do we also bring these two to talk to each other? How then, even if and when you're an entrepreneur, how do you bring that thing of giving back? Because for us as academics, that's actually what we do. We're giving back because we've qualified and we want to make others better than us. So then how do we bring that, and I think it's something our country really needs, on how we bring this giving back within the making money space. So completely different as I always am. I'd like to end with that. So thank you very much.
See you, Matana. When you going back Cape Town? No.